looking for a CRM your sales team will actually want to use.
Hi, everybody. I've received a number of requests to speak about, based on my experience, what I have done effectively to manage a crisis. And, you know, over the course of 29 years in many different parts of the world, I, not by design necessarily, have been asked and was tapped upon to step into leadership roles and handle different crises. So I've boiled down what's worked well for me in different countries, different cultures, into just a few techniques that I'm going to share with you over the next few minutes on this live stream. So thanks for tuning in. And you know, most people, when times are good, they do well. And it's, I had a boss one time that described this as the case of the rising tide. And Mr. Ken Dowd often spoke about the case of the rising tide, which is when the markets do well, everybody does well. And when the markets don't do so well, then very few do well. And when there's a crisis, why do some people flourish and actually get more energy and perform better when the majority of people don't do so well? And that's really what I'm going to talk about now, is what needs to be done in a crisis, or better yet, to prepare for a crisis, so that you're not really running into panic mode when times get choppy. And, you know, in order not to buckle under pressure, what's really useful is to practice without pressure. We've all heard of the fire drill. Why do companies, and why do apartments and condominiums in different parts of the world, why do they have a fire drill? Well, that's to practice and make sure that everybody understands what to do in case there's a fire. And with a crisis, in crisis management, it's really no different. And you know, it's important to you know, understand the environment that you're in. And when the crisis happens, there are three things that I do to make sure that that's handled well in business. And number one is to be visible, to be present. You know, when the global financial crisis hit in the mid to late 2000s, one of the best things that we did in the company that I worked with, and my leadership and my teams as well, what we did is that we were highly visible, and we embraced the challenge with an aggressive attitude, not a defensive attitude. So be visible. Don't hide. That's number one. Make sure that you're out there. Number two, never start and stop communication. Communicate all the time, okay? And even if you don't have a lot to say, stay in touch and get close and stay close to your teams and to your customers, okay? And this is very powerful advice, because much of the competition actually does the opposite. So if you want to thrive during a crisis, communicate and keep communicating. Don't turn it on and off, because that on and off with communication can actually create more panic to those that are looking to you for direction. And then finally, The third and final piece of advice is to keep your promises. Don't promise something under pressure that you can't keep later, or you'll lose all credibility. So be realistic, communicate where you're at, communicate what you can, but don't attempt to overpromise when you know you cannot deliver that. So these things, three things are critically important. Be visible during the crisis. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Don't start and stop. And lastly, keep your promises. Don't make a promise that you can't keep. And if you do these three things, you'll keep your team engaged, and you might even find that you'll be in a stronger market position than you were when times were good. And keep in mind the concept of the fire drill, because with the fire drill, you have the opportunity to practice without pressure. And it's a very good idea to constantly be ready for that crisis, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're working in a large company, in a small business, medium-sized business, anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter. Be ready for that crisis and have your teams ready for that crisis, because your customers will count on you regardless of the situation. So be ready, be on your toes. So that's it for today. Please tune in to the Packard Network Live on Thursday, where I'm going to have a very special guest, Mr. Dave Tina, live from Las Vegas. And we're going to talk about the enormous success this gentleman has had in building Urban Nest Realty, and how establishing a unique proposition can impact an entire industry. And you're going to love the inspirational style that Mr. Tina is going to tell us about. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon on my next pop-up live.